Welcome back to another episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Jones, the Bluff City Cowboy, coming to you live from Memphis, Tennessee. And NFL football is officially back. Training camp opened up earlier this week, and the Dallas Cowboys have been in action since Monday. And yesterday was the first day of padded practice. So now we are officially into real football. So now we can actually talk about some actual things on the field, talk about what we see as we get prepared for our first preseason game next week. Also, guys, I know we're all diehard Cowboy fans, but we have to pay attention to the rest of the league. So just remember that the first NFL preseason game is tomorrow night, the Hall of Fame game against I believe it's the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Bears will be playing tomorrow night. So if you don't have anything to do, make sure you tune in and watch that game so that you can get your feel of some NFL football. But tonight we are focusing on the Dallas Cowboys and what we have all seen from training camp through reports and videos that have been posted on social media. And we're going to do a little special teams talk. Always one of my favorite subjects. I know people who've been following me for the past couple of years know that I'm a big believer that special teams does matter. So I do want to talk a little bit about the special teams, some of the rule changes, and how I think that it will affect this coming year. So thank you guys for joining us. I see we got Jeff Pop already pretty active in the comments. So before the show gets started, make sure you guys follow Jeff Pop's lead. This is an interactive show, so we are fueled off your questions, comments, and feedback. Before we get started, got a little bit of housekeeping to do. So before we get started, if you guys haven't done so already, make sure that you join the DC4L Facebook groups. There are two groups, a public group as well as a private group, and DC4L also has a Patreon, so make sure you guys check that out as well. If you just want to have some great NFL and Dallas Cowboys talk, feel free to join both of the DC4L Facebook groups. And if you want to get some opportunities to win some tickets, great prizes, giveaways, raffles, contact Amanda Foster and get involved in that Patreon group. A lot of great stuff they give out throughout the year. If you haven't done so already, also make sure that you go on to YouTube and hit that subscribe button for the DCL YouTube page. And while you are on YouTube, if you could, please take 1 second to give my page a subscribe as well. And also hit that bell so that you will be updated with any future Fifth Quarter podcast or just generic videos that I may do in the future. Got a couple of things that I have personally planned throughout the year, so make sure you guys tune in and subscribe to that YouTube channel so that you can be aware of that. The next thing that I'm going to be doing personally is I do have a Bluff City Cowboys fantasy football group. The group is pretty much full right now. We have some podcasters. We have some viewers like my guy Mendoza joining us. Thank you for tuning in. We have some super fans in the chat. I'm working on getting a former player in the chat in the fantasy league, and we will be doing our fantasy league draft live on my YouTube channel. So it's going to be a lot of guys who have a lot of Dallas Cowboys knowledge. We're going to be picking our fantasy teams. We're also going to talk a little football, and we'd love for you guys to join us and give us your thoughts on how we're drafting. And if you're unfamiliar with fantasy football, that'd be a great opportunity to get a chance to watch 10 guys who are very experienced in fantasy football draft live so that you can have an idea of how you should draft when you decide to do your own fantasy league. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, Bluff City Cowboys, so that you guys can tune in on that. Also, before we get started, I got my guy Mendoza in the chat. Thank you for joining as always. And also want to Want to send a special happy birthday out to my guy Mendoza. Appreciate you tuning in on your birthday. I know you probably been pretty busy all day, but thank you for taking the time to come in for a few seconds and join us on some Dallas Cowboys talk. I see we also have Jeff Davis joining us. Jeff, thank you for joining us as well. I see the likes and the views are pretty much the same. So great job, all you guys. Let's get those views up. If you haven't done so already, please share this video to your favorite Facebook group. You can also share it to your personal page if you like. But let's spread the word about the Fifth Quarter Podcast and let's get the engagement going. All right, so that's pretty much all I got in terms of housekeeping. So let's get into it. Training Camp 2024 has some big news come out earlier this week. Jeff Pop in the comments touched on it before. Sam Williams on the first day of practice unfortunately went down, tore his ACL. I think he partially tore his PCL as well. So he is definitely out for the season. That's going to be a big blow to the defensive line as well as to the special teams, because Sam Williams would have been an integral part of the new kickoff team under the new rules. And I'm going to talk about that later in the show. And I'm going to explain a little bit of why a guy like Sam Williams would have just been a special teams ace for this team and probably in the NFL. So that's definitely a big loss. Got some news earlier today that the Cowboys were trying out a few defensive ends, in particular, the name Carl Lawson. For you draft guys, he was drafted in the 4th round of the 2017 draft by the Cincinnati Bengals. He was a guy that I really wanted us to draft on this team at that point. Seems like for the past couple of years, we haven't had a chance to really make that connection. But I think this time we're finally going to get him. On top of that, when he was at Cincinnati, Mike Zimmer was at Cincinnati also. So he already has a lot of familiarity with the scheme. So not only can he just jump in and be productive immediately, he's also going to give a veteran presence to a guy like a Micah Parsons, Marshawn Nealon, whoever fills in for Sam Williams, to help get those guys up to speed for the upcoming season. Because whenever a team changes their scheme, the best thing you can do to help out the players is bring in a former player who's familiar with that scheme. So I'm definitely hoping that Carl Lawson signing comes to fruition. All right, so let's take it back on the field. So there's not a lot that we can really see as the general public in terms of what's happening during the practices. All we can really do is watch social media, watch whatever clips we can watch, and kind of extrapolate whatever we can and come up with our own conclusions. So I've taken a look at pretty much every tweet, every video that has been posted over the past 3 days. And I just put together a couple of notes on the offensive side and the defensive side that really stand out to me in terms of what's been going on so far in training camp. And we've only had 1 or 2 days of padded practice. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about could change, because there's a big difference between being in the pads and not. So I see we got JJ Hodge coming in. Thank you for joining us. Looks like a new name, so definitely appreciate you tuning in. Ray Dean, you've definitely been here quite a few times, so thank you for coming back. Said, what's up with Dak? Trey looks terrible. Zimmer has a new guy to replace Williams. Williams. Sam Williams, yeah, we'll see. Just talked about that. Carl Lawson. We'll see if they sign him. Hopefully they do. Definitely going to do a little bit of talking about offense and defense. Tim Estabrook definitely looks like a new name. So, Tim, thank you for joining us as well. Definitely appreciate you tuning in. And then Jeff Pop says Trey looks like a third-string Southlake quarterback. I mean, to be honest, Southlake has some pretty talented guys coming through, so that may almost be an insult to Southlake, Texas football. See, we got Alexander Valdez joining us saying Michael Thomas. I guess you want that as a potential name to join the team. Definitely could be an option. Sharon Thomas, thank you for joining us. Looks like a new name. So definitely appreciate you tuning in. Jeff says camp looks kind of posh and boring. The lack of fans in the crowd does make it feel a little less boring, because in years past, whenever you see a good play, you'd always get that uproar from the crowd. And also players feed off of the fans, whether it's in a real game or in a practice. So it definitely is probably kind of ramped down a little bit because of the lack of fans. JJ Hodge saying, do I know Mark Holmes? I mean, I don't know him personally, but I am familiar with his work and his podcasting. Definitely a great guy. And I see I got my guy, Coach Webster, joining us. So Coach Webb, thank you for tuning in also. Shane Odom says, I'd rather have a young player with upside than bring in an old player to replace Sam Williams. I agree to an extent, Shane. And here's the reason why. Number one, we have several young players on the team already. We have Tyrus Wheat, who was an undrafted guy last year, who played the entire year going into his second year. He's going to probably step up. We just drafted Marshawn Nealon, so that's another young guy. Last year, we drafted Junior Fehoko. So we have 3 young defensive ends with basically no experience on the team already. And all of those guys are extremely athletic. So those are your upside players. So as of right now, you have those 3 guys, D-Law and Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons is going to be a part-time defensive end. I don't care what they say. He's going to be doing some ACAP blitzing. So you basically have 3 young guys plus D-Law. You need another veteran opposite D-Law so that when you're in crunch time, you have somebody that you can trust opposite him that can either generate a pass rush or know how to seal and contain backside, frontside on key running plays. So you definitely need a player with some experience to come in. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier in the show, a guy like Carl Lawson is experienced in the Mike Zimmer scheme. So not only are you getting a guy who can be a mentor, you have a guy who knows the scheme better than probably anybody else on the roster. And just like Jeff said, he also plays the run very well also. AJ Bell looks like another new name, so thank you for joining. The boys will bring some heat. Some may think Zeke is overrated and outdated, but sometimes bring in new talent and have the good old boys all together. It'll all come out in the end. That remains to be seen, AJ Bell. There's a mixed bag when it comes to Zeke. All I can say is you're not going to see him in the preseason at all. So you can kind of not expect to see that. So you got to wait till September, and then we'll be able to gauge where Zeke Elliott is. Right now, we're all just speculating because he's a year older and he left the team. We'll see how he does when he returns. I see we got the co-creator of DC4L, Amanda Foster. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you tuning in. Mendoza says Lawson does feel like that vet signing they've done at the position, a la Tack McKinley, Dante Fowler Jr., go back a couple of more years. Name just left me. The defensive end who played for the Rams left us and then went to Chicago. So we have a history of signing these veteran defensive ends in training camp. And more times than not, they work out. Okay, Jeff Pop saying, look, it's easy as this defense not good. Offense has to score a lot. 10-7, 9-8. I'm along those lines with you as well, Jeff Pop. But we'll see what happens as the season progresses. I think the offensive line will be a lot better than you guys think. And I think the running backs, while they may be less talented, I think because of the change in blocking scheme as well as the size and strength of these guys, they're going to help us get a lot more touchdowns than we did last year. So if the passing game stays the same, the rushing yards may go down, but I think the rushing touchdowns will probably double. And I think that'll make the offense, from a scoring standpoint, look as good or better than last year, even though the running game as a whole may not be as good. Sonny Smith looks like another new name, so thank you for joining us. Sonny says, hope we trade a pick for a better all-around back. I would be shocked if that happened, Sonny. I think you better get used to seeing Zeke Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Freeman, possibly Nate Pete. And if you're looking for another back, you're probably going to see a Dalvin Cook or you're going to see a Leonard Fournette. I don't think we're going to bring a guy from another team unless a team like a Chicago or a San Diego or a New York Jets that's just extremely deep in the running back position. They just so happen to cut a young, talented back, and we're able to claim them off waivers. Outside of that, I don't think you're going to see a talented back come to this roster. Sonny Smith saying, do see good things from Dowdle? Now, it's hard to gauge in the preseason because guys can't tackle, but he does look explosive. I'm just looking forward to seeing him in live action to see how well those holes open up with this new inside zone blocking scheme and how well our tandem of running backs can hit those holes and get productive. Jeff saying he would kick the tires on Kendre Miller, buried on the Saints depth chart. If he's cut, that could be a possible option. So definitely got to pay attention to that. Jonathan Webster, Pap, says, where is Vaughn in the mix? Deuce Vaughn. So I went back and forth with a guy on social media earlier today, and I normally don't. Before I say this, let me start off by saying I really like Deuce Vaughn. I've been following Kansas State for the past 3 years. Deuce Vaughn is a really talented running back. And Jonathan Webster's a college football coach, so I know he's kind of busy implementing his new schemes and getting his players ready for the season. So he hasn't really been paying attention to Cowboys football as much as normal. So I don't know if you know Jonathan, but the Cowboys have been playing Deuce Vaughn as a slot receiver so far in training camp. And to me, that signifies the beginning of the end, like Amanda said. He's packing his bags. The Cowboys, and I've said this probably 5 dozen times, the team is going to an inside zone scheme where instead of having shifty guys who can stretch and then find a hole and cut back, they want guys who are going to hit that A gap, hit that B gap, can take a pounding, and can keep going through the gaps. Deuce Vaughn, unfortunately, does not fit that running scheme. So I think because of that reason, he's going to have a very hard time making this team. On top of that, he's never returned a punt. He only has 7 career kickoff returns in college, and all of those were in his freshman year. And outside of returner, there is no position on special teams for a 5'7", 175-pound player. Nowhere on special teams outside of returner, and he doesn't do that. So he has no place on special teams. At best, he could be the 4th running back. The 4th running back has to play special teams, and if you don't, you're not going to be in the NFL. So unfortunately, Sonny Smith 5'4". I think I was being generous with 5'7". You're right. It's probably closer to 5'4", 5'5". But unfortunately, if you don't play special teams, and you're at best the fourth running back on any roster, you're not going to be on a roster. You'll be lucky to be on a practice squad. You're going to have to find a special coach like maybe a Sean Payton, who has a history with guys like that of his size. And maybe if we cut him, Sean Payton to give him a flyer on practice squad. But he's not making a roster. He has to work out as a gadget slot guy to be able to play in the NFL going forward. And I hate to say it because, like you said, he's got skills, he's shifty, he's fast, but potential only gets you so far in the NFL. At some point, you got to produce. And if you're at the bottom of the roster, you got to produce on special teams. All right. So thank you guys. I mean, the show is already kicking off to a great start. I haven't even had a chance to talk about any of the stuff I've had listed, and we're at 22 minutes. So I definitely appreciate this. You guys definitely fuel the Fifth Quarter podcast. So I definitely appreciate all the new people who are joining us also, and all the great questions and comments. Mendoza, I wish, because there was talk about the Broncos may have Javonte on the cut block as a Javonte Williams on the cut block. I would love to make that swap. Jeff saying, I'm interested in seeing our 4 receiver sets. We have Turpin involved in the offense. I think you're going to see you know what? Now that I think about it, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of 4 receiver sets this year, Jeff. I think this team is going to go back to more 11 and 12 personnel with 1 tight end, 2 tight ends. I think you're probably going to see more 12 personnel than you see 4 wide receiver, unfortunately. So I wouldn't get my hopes up seeing 4 wide receivers out there. And to be honest, I don't think we keep more than 5 receivers on this team on the initial 53-man roster. And I'll talk about why once I talk about special teams. All right, so let me get back into it. So training camp 2024, I've gone through all of the videos, all of the tweets that I could possibly look at, and everybody's talked about the obvious. Tyler Guyton's look good. You've seen the chain of interceptions from a certain quarterback that fans think could start for this team. You've seen highlights of different defensive players, but I've tried to pick out some stuff that I noticed also that if you're not looking for it, you really won't notice it. So let's get into it. And first, we'll start off with my offensive training camp notes. So when I look at some of the clips on training camp, a couple of things that stand out. Number one, Tyler Smith. I mean, he's building upon what he did last year. Every time I watch an offensive clip, I just naturally pay attention to the offensive line because that's kind of where I got my start at. I've seen one time where Tyler Smith was even remotely in trouble. And I mean, I've probably seen 30 clips coming out of camp. Every clip, he's stonewalling guys 2 yards off the snap, and they're not getting close to the quarterback. And that goes for Mozzie, that goes for Nealon, that goes for whoever lines up in front of him. Even when they do a blitz, he's right there on top of it. Now, I don't know if that should be a sign of bad things to come for our interior D-line, or if Tyler Smith is just that guy. I'm going to lean more towards Tyler Smith as that guy. Talking about the second Tyler on the team, Tyler Guyton. So when we first talked about him in the draft, for you guys that watch the show, you know, Amanda and I, we both told everybody before the draft, Tyler Guyton was going to be the guy. Super athletic left tackle, a bit of a project, but the potential just jumps off the charts. And based off of the clips that we've seen so far at the camp, it looks like he is well ahead of schedule. I personally said that if he had a rookie year that was as good as Terrence Steele, that we should be fortunate. And if you guys remember Terrence Steele's rookie year, At some points, it was so bad we were calling him Terrence Aluminum. So I had low expectations for Tyler Guyton. But one thing I didn't anticipate is the fact that not only is this kid extremely talented, he's also a hard worker off the field. He's been working with the offensive line guru Duke Manyweather quite a bit, and it shows on tape, because if you watch the snaps that he's showing from camp compared to the snaps that he got in college, his hand placement is much better, his footwork is much better, and he's not lunging as much. So he's definitely taking those tips to heart, and he's implementing them on the practice field. So having him go up against a guy like Micah Parsons and get those well-needed reps is going to be valuable for him. And the one thing that I really like about Tyler Guyton in these clips, for one, he's going against Micah Parsons and holding his own. But when he does get beaten, his recovery is just amazing for a guy his age. The athleticism is just unreal, how Micah Parsons can beat him off the snap, and he finds a way to recover to set the edge to make sure Micah doesn't get that turn back into the quarterback. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does against other competition. But as of right now, I'm extremely impressed. Yeah, I don't put Chaz Green on him. Sonny Smith saying Guyton on point. Curious to see if BB gets the start rookie or not. Well, early in camp, and I talked about this before camp started, the Cowboys have a tendency to put the rookies on the second unit and then kind of transition them into the first unit. Well, it looks like Tyler Guyton's done so well, they've already started the first team transition for him. As of right now, it looks like Brock Hoffman has been getting all the starting reps. So maybe Cooper BB will start to transition into the first unit some more. But as of right now, it looks like it's Brock Hoffman's job to lose. The last note that I saw, Jalen Tolbert has been improving dramatically. You can see it in the route running. You can see it in the confidence. You can see it in his confidence as well as Dak's confidence in him. Dak has been throwing a lot of deep balls to Jalen Tolbert, and he's been coming down with them. He's been making back shoulder catches. He's been making great adjustments in the air. He's looking like what you would expect from a wide receiver in his third season. I'm not gonna put him in the Pro Bowl. I'm not even gonna put him as a number 2, but I'm almost certain he can, at a minimum, match what we got from Michael Gallup last year, and that was about 340 yards. So if Tolbert can give us more than Michael Gallup gave us last year, I think we're going to be a very successful offense. And that's one of those things I'm definitely looking forward to. And Jeff Pop says when CD comes back, he goes back to 4. Not necessarily Jeff Pop, because that number 3 receiver spot is wide open. He doesn't necessarily fit the X receiver role, but if he's out there and he's producing and Dak trusts him, they're definitely going to find a spot to put him on the field. So he could possibly be that number 3 wide receiver as the X, put Brandon Cooks at the Z, and put Lamb back in the slot. And now you've got a pretty solid 3 wide receiver set. So those are the first 3 things that stood up on the offensive side. Let me go and Jeff Pop says it is, but he's a deep threat. So the few clips that I did watch, he is doing more than just running 9 routes and deep post. He is doing some comebacks. He's running drag routes. The thing about this scheme is not like the old scheme where you necessarily have to have a big physical X wide receiver. It's always a positive if you do, but the way this scheme is going to be run is going to be a lot more 2-man games. It's going to be a lot more drag routes. It's going to be a lot more 10-yard curls. And I think he can do all those well enough to at least give us a viable 4th option, because as you guys know, Lamb is the first option. Jake Ferguson has now become the number 2. So Cooks is your 3, and whatever Tolbert gives you is just going to be a bonus at this point. But if he can give us more than Michael Gallup gave us last year, it's definitely a success. And Sonny Smith says, hope we don't have to throw it 50 times a game. Got to run the ball. I think we're going to run the ball a lot more this year, Sonny Smith. Again, inside zone scheme, 2nd and 3, 3rd and 2. I think a lot of those passes we saw last year in that situation, I think they're going to be runs because we have running backs who are able to push for those extra yards, and we're going to have an improved offensive line and a scheme that makes it easier to convert short yardage runs. So even though, again, the running game may not be as successful in terms of the number 1 getting 1,000 yards, I think the short yardage game and the touchdowns are going to make the running game more successful. But from a statistical standpoint as a whole, it may not be as good as last year. But I think it's going to even out. So I don't think some of those scenarios last year where we were 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, some of those are going to be a lot more runs this year than they were last year. So I think it's going to balance out. And I don't think we're going to have to throw it 50 times a game. All right, so let me get back into the rest of my offensive notes. I got a couple more notes for you guys. So the other 3 notes that kind of stood out. So number 4, Dak is throwing a lot more deep balls. Now, to me, that's a good thing because, one, as Sean Smith just pointed out, Sonny Smith, I'm sorry, Jalen Tolbert is not going to be just a deep threat. It may look like it. I don't think it is. And that was Jeff Pop. I apologize to say it that. But he's also throwing a lot of deep balls to Brandon Cooks. And if you guys remember last year, one of the big problems we had the first half of the year is that Dak and Cooks were not on the same page at all. Based off of the few clips that I've seen circulating around Twitter, it looks like Dak is starting to get into more of a rhythm throwing deep balls. And that's going to be a good thing when you have a guy like Brandon Cooks and Kevontae Turpin who can be deep threats and take the top off of a defense at any given point. So that's definitely a positive. Number 5, offense has been moving pretty well without Lamb. I mean, it is training camp early and pads just came on, but it is promising to see that the offense is still scoring touchdowns and that the ball is still moving without CeeDee Lamb. If you guys remember a couple years back after we got rid of Dez, that was not the case with our offense, but at least it looks like the offense is still somewhat competent. And before camp started, we also said Lamb being gone gives other guys the opportunity to build their confidence. So now you implant Lamb and you got these other guys who are your 4th and 5th options, but they have more confidence. It makes the offense as a whole look better. Jeff asked let me go to Jeff Pop's question, then Jeff, I'll come to yours. Charles Haley said in a recent interview, we need an Alvin Harper deep threat, a big receiver. That's what we miss. To me, that's kind of old school thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying that you need a big receiver. Like I said before, a big receiver would definitely be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary to be successful. And look around the league. Do the Chiefs have a big receiver? Do the Bills have a big receiver? Do the Dolphins have a big receiver? I'm naming playoff teams here, guys. I'm naming teams that were in the Super Bowl. Do the Rams have a big receiver? You can get by without a big receiver. Now, if you have a big natural X receiver, it definitely helps. And it can help a lot in certain situations. But if you don't have one, in today's NFL, you can still be a very successful offense. So I just wanted to put that out there. Got a couple of other questions. Tim Easterbrook, I hope I pronounced that correctly. First time joining live. So Tim, thank you for tuning in. Definitely appreciate your support. You asked the question, do I go live at certain times? I go live every Wednesday at 8:30 Central Standard Time, Tim. During the off season, I've been kind of on and off because there's not a lot of content to talk about. But going forward from today and into the regular season, I'm going to be here every Wednesday night, 8:30 Central Standard Time. And during the season, we'll also do a pregame show. So I hope you continue to tune in, and I hope you continue to join us. And I definitely appreciate your kind words. I put a lot of work into this, and I'm glad to see that some of you guys are actually getting something out of it. And keep asking questions, keep commenting, because again, you guys fuel what I do. Sonny Smith, we do have a lot of viable deep threat options. So we definitely have a plethora of guys who could step in. All right, so let me go back to my offensive notes, and then we'll get into the defensive notes. So got some other offensive notes. My last two, we talked about the deep threats, and the offense has been moving the ball well without Lamb. Then the last one, I've been giving you guys a lot of positives. Now, I don't normally take a lot of negative feedback from what I see in training camp, because again, training camp is the time that you work out your flaws. So you definitely want to go out there. If you're going to make mistakes, you want to make them at training camp. On top of that, when you're going against your own team, it's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to good plays and bad plays. Because if one side of the ball, for example, if Tyler Guyton was getting beaten nonstop, it's bad for Tyler Guyton, but Micah Parsons the one doing it. Okay, Micah Parsons in rare form. If the receivers are killing, that's good for Dak and offense. But then you're wondering, is there a problem with our secondary? So these things can kind of be a back and forth give and take. But the way Trey Lance has looked, there's no positives you can take from what Trey Lance is doing right now. And again, it's training camp. You want to work out mistakes right here. But the mistakes that he's making are just god-awful bad. Now, let me just put up these 3 clips, and I know it's only 3 clips, but all 3 of these clips were from practice today. 3 interceptions by Trey Lance. Let's take a look at them really quick, and I'll get you guys' thoughts. Okay, so these were his 3 interceptions. Let's take a look at the first one. Okay. Play action. Who was he throwing it to? Somebody tell me. Somebody tell me. He threw it straight to the defensive guy. Another play action, deep throw. Okay. Linebacker sits right under that. A veteran quarterback should see a linebacker who's settling. Last throw, deep ball. Which one is the receiver? Because it looks like the defensive guy was the receiver and the offensive guy was the defender. I mean, if Mukwamu was the receiver, that's a great touchdown throw. But unfortunately, Mukwamu was the cornerback, and he threw the ball right to him. Easy picks that a veteran NFL quarterback who's been in the league for 4 years and who's been in our system for a full calendar year should not be making. Now, if it's a tip ball or you're throwing at Deron Bland, I'll give you a pass on that. But this is second unit guys, and you're throwing it right to them. It's not like there's a struggle between the offense and the defense to get the ball, and the defense is just coming away with it. He's throwing it straight to guys. That's concerning. That's very concerning. And I know the fan base has their likes and their dislikes. There's no way you can justify those 3 interceptions today. Those were embarrassing. And I don't know where we go from here in terms of quarterback 3. I hope when preseason starts that he does not have these problems, but those interceptions were so bad that I just don't see how those aren't going to translate to an NFL game. But we'll find out on August 8th, and we'll just keep tempering expectations and keeping our hopes up that he's going to progress. But those were some bad interceptions. Stephen Arthur asked the question, have you heard the latest on contracts? This is your first time joining. So Stephen Arthur, thank you for joining as well. Definitely appreciate you tuning in. Hope you continue to join us. There's not a lot of talk right now about the contracts. A couple of people who've been trusted in the Twitterverse have said that contracts are progressing, but there's been no official word yet. In my opinion, the contract should be fairly easy to write up. The highest contract right now is Tua/Love. You just give Dak more than what they got if you want to keep him. Should be simple enough. For the wide receiver, the highest contract is Justin Jefferson. Just below him, you got Tyreek Hill and you got AJ Brown. Put Dak somewhere in the middle, make it closer to Jefferson. Should be simple enough. But I personally feel like the Cowboys are playing their usual tug-of-war games in contracts, and they're delaying it by playing their deadline tactics where they just keep sending lowball offers until they eventually inch up to a spot where the other side will just give in. And if you go and find clips online, I shared this with my admin group of DC4L. There's a clip of D-Law when he was talking about contract negotiations with the Cowboys when he signed his deal. He said his first offer from Dallas was $10 million a year. Now, eventually he got up to 17, but they started him at 10 and then kept inching up more and more. So that's the kind of tactics that the Cowboys like to use. And I necessarily don't think that's right, especially if you're talking about franchise guys, face of the franchise guys, your top jersey sellers, your fan favorites. You can start to rub guys the wrong way when you do that, and you can also set a bad precedent for the future. They haven't done it yet, but these negotiations to me are a start of some very bad signs from our front office, worse than years past. Shane Odom asked the question, do I think the lack of fans at practice is a precursor to the season? Shane, I don't think it's a precursor. The problem that I do foresee is the Cowboys Stadium is going to fill up no matter what. The question is, how many of those fans will be Cowboys fans and how many of those fans will be from opposing teams? Because season tickets are sold and they're sold out. The question is, do those season ticket holders get discouraged and sell their tickets to the Bengals fans coming in town, the Commanders fans coming in town? AT&T Stadium could look like a away game in some big games this year. That's concerning. I never think the fans will let the stadium be empty, but we could see a lot less blue jerseys than we like and a lot more cheering during bad times, and that could be a problem on the field. Tim Harvey says Dak's replacement. I'm assuming you say not looking good. I'm so glad this is happening so the fans will wake up. I mean, people have high hopes for Trey Lance. Maybe he'll come through for him. Right now, looks pretty bad. All right, so let me go to the defensive side of the ball, and then we're at 45 minutes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about special teams because I do want to hit these special teams notes before I get out of here because I feel like they're going to be really important in terms of roster development. So let me go to my defensive notes that I've noticed so far. A lot of stuff we could talk about on the defensive side. So number one, Mozzie on the good side, he does look bigger. He looks to me 310, 315. The problem is we don't have a lot of defensive linemen, and I've been seeing a lot of clips with Mozzie Smith playing with the first and second team units. To me, that's concerning because, for one, we don't have a lot of veteran defensive tackles on this team. And you would assume that your first round pick is going to be pretty much cemented with the ones. The fact that he's playing with the twos gives me major concerns. Now, maybe they're working them back in slowly from whatever happened this offseason, but I would expect Mozzie Smith to be a consistent first unit guy. Continuing the rest of the interior of the line, Chauncey Golston looks a lot bigger. Like Chauncey Golston came on this team, he was probably 270. Looking at him on tape, he looks closer to 285 now. He looks almost as big as Osa. And he's playing inside a lot more too. So initially I thought Chauncey may go back to his defensive end spot, but I think he's transitioning to a full-time defensive tackle. He's like 6'5", 6'9", 6'10" wingspan, knows how to separate guys from his body, still has some of that quickness from his time as an edge. So I think Golston's going to really take a step forward this year in terms of being in that interior rotation. Another thing I noticed, when you look at some of those clips with Micah Parsons, Marshawn Nealon, our second round pick, has been playing inside and outside. Now, when you look at him play, he's always been a power player. So he's always relied heavily on his leverage as well as his strength. So seeing him inside is not a surprise, but seeing him inside as much as I have with the first unit has been kind of a shock. So got my last three defensive notes that have stood out to me, and then we'll talk special teams. Number 4, the linebacker unit looks much better. You can definitely tell that there's veterans in that unit. You see guys dropping into their zones a lot quicker in pass coverage. Looks like it's been less confusion at the line in terms of getting lined up. So those are all good signs. Another thing that's kind of stood out to me when I watch 7-on-7, there's been a lot of scenarios where you see both linebackers lined up in the A gap, and they both either fan out and drop into a zone, or one of those guys blitzes. So we talked about that before the season. That's been one of those major philosophy, schematic wrinkles of a Mike Zimmer scheme. It's good to see that that's starting to come back. And the few clips that I saw, it looks like it's been a lot of Eric Kendricks and Overshown in those double A gap formations. So those are two guys you definitely want to see in that position. And based off the few clips I've seen, Kalen Carson may be a steal. Like whoever's doing our scouting and our training for our cornerbacks, yeah, we better keep close ties with him. I don't know if it's Al Smith or not. I'm sorry, not Al Smith. Our DB coach. I don't know if it's him or not, but he looks really good when it comes to playing his man, playing the ball. He definitely looks like he's going to be hard to keep off the field if training camp translates to preseason. So those are pretty much all of the initial notes that I've noticed just watching clips and reading tweets online. I hope you guys got something out of that. We're at 50 minutes. I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about special teams, but I don't want to stay past an hour. But there are some topics I definitely have to hit. So when I talk about the importance of special teams, and we're going to start off with punt and punt return first. So when you look at punt and punt return, you have 3 positions that are extremely important to your team. And these guys are definitely going to make the roster. That is your gunners, your jammers, and your personal protectors. And apologize, I had a punt chart to show you guys what they look like on the field, but it would not load, so I don't have it right now. But for the people who aren't familiar, when you're watching punt team, the gunner is the guy who's on the outside, and they're usually the first ones that make the tackles. And the jammers are the guys who are supposed to be blocking the gunners. So those two positions are extremely important, because one side is more than likely the guy who's going to make the tackle on the returner, and the other side is the guy who's supposed to block him. So the past 5 years, that guy has been CJ Goodwin on one side. It's been kind of a rotation of guys opposite him. I think without seeing practice, it's probably going to be Mukwamu opposite him. So guys like that, they're going to be important to the development of the team. They're going to be bottom of the roster guys. They're probably not going to play any defense, but they're going to make the team because of their importance on special teams. And then you also have your personal protector, who's your he's the guy on punt team who stands just in front of the punter. He's the guy who calls out the protection. He's the guy who tells the snapper when to snap it. And he's the last line of defense when it comes to blocking if a rusher goes free to try to get to the punter. That position is extremely important. So prior to the rule changes on kickoff, and I hope I don't lose a lot of you guys, those three positions were the most important special teams positions on the team. The kickoff was becoming extinct. As you guys know, teams were doing a lot of touchbacks. They won a lot of returns. Definitely won a lot of touchdowns. So kickoff positions just started becoming just throw a guy out there because the kicker's going to boom it into the back of the end zone. And I see I got my guy Jonathan Webster, who is a long-time special teams coach as well. Personal protector is going to make the team. Gunner, jammer, personal protector. Prior to this year, those were the three, in my opinion, the three most important special teams positions, because kickoff and kickoff return had kind of become irrelevant. And I see we got Night Owl Cowboy joining us. I'm assuming you have your own podcast as well, Chris Hennigan. So I'll definitely, as soon as this show ends, I will go on YouTube and try to look up Night Owl Cowboy, and I'll give you a subscribe. So thank you for joining us. And if you get a chance, do the same for me. So talking about punt, those three positions. So as I was doing my research, I found a very interesting interview from Bones Fossil talking about special teams. So I pulled two clips from that interview that I want to share with you guys to kind of bring home the point that I was making. And the first topic was about how the roster is going to change with these new kickoff rules and how many special teams guys are going to make the team. So take a look. Let me know what you think in a second.
And it felt like the last couple of years, it was maybe 3. And it was because the touchback percentage was so high on kickoff, teams would say, hey, we're only going to be playing 8 to 9 reps of punt versus punt return, and the rest of the balls are touchbacks on kickoff return. So we don't need that many. But now it's got to swing back for the teams that are going to be the best at it to, hey, you got 6 dedicated special teams guys that can also serve as backups on offense or defense, but they're dressing because of their core special teams capabilities. And I think it's going to swing back that way. So it's healthy for the, not only returners and kickers, but for the core special teams guys who are critical parts of the game, at least in my opinion. I'm clearly biased.
So that is Bones Fossil, our special teams coach. And if you guys are not aware, he was also one of the guys who pounded the table to get the kickoff and kickoff return rules changed. So he's had a leg up on the rest of the NFL in terms of figuring out these new rules and figuring out how to manipulate them. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the kickoff rules affect the game. So let me just show you guys this quick clip of how the rules have changed, because I'm a visual person and I like to show you guys also kind of how things are from a visual standpoint. So these are the new kickoff rules. So now the kicking team will line up on the 30. They'll be kicking from their 35-yard line, but the kickoff guys will be lined up on the opposite 40. So they're going to be much closer to the end zone. The other team has to have all 9 of their guys within a 5-yard window with up to 1 or 2 returners in the back. So the guys are going to be a lot closer to each other and closer to the end zone. The ball has to fall within the 20-yard landing zone, or it can go into the red zone. Any kick that falls within the landing zone must be returned. So there's not going to be a lot of touchbacks. If the ball falls within the landing zone and rolls in the end zone, it has to be returned. And if a kick falls short of going to the 20-yard line, the team gets the ball on the 40. But if it's a touchback, the team gets the ball on the 30-yard line. So I know those rules kind of went up there quick, but I just wanted you guys to kind of see it visually so that you can see exactly how the rules will affect the game. So let me just show you quickly a visual of how kickoff used to look. So under the old kickoff rules, you have your 10 guys. They be lined up here. Then you would have 2 or 3 or 4 different levels of kickoff return, where the first line would be 4 to 5 guys. Then you go back 5 or 10 yards. Then there'd be a second wave. Then you go back another 10 yards, and there'd be a third wave. And then you have 1 or 2 returners that are being protected at 3 different levels. Under the new rules, this is what it looks like. There are no longer 3 levels. You have 10 guys on the 40, and then you have 9 or 10 guys 5 yards away. Now, what this does is it's supposed to limit the amount of hard hits because guys are going to be closer to each other, not going to be able to build as much momentum. And it's also supposed to prevent big hits on returners because the guys who are trying to tackle are going to probably be 20 to 30 yards away instead of 40 to 50 yards away full speed. One more thing that the rules that I showed you didn't show. Nobody can move until the returner touches the ball or the ball touches the ground. So everybody has to stand still until they see the ball go into play. So that's going to be another big rule that's going to take place. Now, when I look at these rules, there are a couple of things that stand out to me. And I'm going to keep this chart up here for a second. So when I look at the old rules, and I found this chart that kind of shows what position the guys normally play at these spots. So if you look at the black, that's the kickoff team. You look up there right now, you got cornerbacks, you got speed guys, you got wide receivers, you got DBs, you got 1 tight end, you got a couple of linebackers. That's under the old rules because you needed guys who were able to run 30, 40, 50 yards without getting gassed. Under the new rules, these guys only have to run anywhere from 20 to 30 yards. Some cases, maybe even 10 yards. Pretty much everybody on the NFL team can do that now. So what I personally think that's going to do is that's going to allow teams who, instead of using wide receivers on kickoff, you're going to see a lot more linebackers. You're going to see a lot more athletic defensive ends. You're going to see more hybrid safeties like your jack guys, your safety linebacker hybrids, your J-Ron Curse type guys. Jeff Pop saying you'll need more corners and safeties. I don't think you're going to need as many corners. I think you're going to need more linebackers and defensive ends and big safeties. Like, we already have big safeties. Thank you. The one thing Dan Quinn did right that's going to translate, they're not playing linebacker anymore, but they're definitely going to be active on the kickoff team because you're going to want bigger guys who can get downfield and make tackles. So I think instead of seeing a lot more corners and receivers and running backs, you're going to see a lot more linebackers. Now, when I think about what Dallas has done this offseason, it starts to make sense why they would re-sign a guy like a Damian Wilson. Damian Wilson has, for the past 7 years, probably been one of the best special teamers in football. His time at Dallas, his time at Indy. They brought him back for a reason, and I think their reason is because of these new kickoff rules. He's probably going to be your veteran chief guy on your kickoff team. And then we talk about, and you could put running backs on there as well, Jeff Pop. Great point, and I'll talk about that in a second. Then you talk about Willie Harvey Jr., the guy from the XFL. So fans say, oh, he's just a guy. We're taking XFL guys. What are they going to do on the defense? For you guys that don't know, these kickoff rules originated from the XFL. So Willie Harvey Jr. has played under these rules for 2 years. And he was one of the top defense and special teams guys from the XFL. So now you get one of the top guys who's familiar with these rules onto an NFL roster, and they're looking for bigger guys. I think both of those guys are going to make the roster, and I think it's going to be because of kickoffs. Because in years past, maybe one kickoff was returned. Under these new rules, more than likely every kickoff is going to be returned under the new rules. So now the kickoff team becomes even more important. And those two guys are both very skilled tacklers. They're both high special teams players. Jeff Pop talks about running backs. Or he said put Trey on there to cover his salary. Could be an option. Also, if you have big physical running backs, let me go back to the chart again. So let's go back to the old kickoff rules. You see, you have 3 levels of guys. Essentially, your front level is your somewhat big guys, your outside linebackers. You put your 2 corners on the end to try to offset those 2 speed guys on the end. Then behind them, you go bigger with tight ends and fullbacks. And then in the back, you go even bigger with tight ends as well. When I look at these new rules, and this is just me, because the guys are so close, I think we're going to see offensive linemen on kickoff return. And the reason I say that, for you guys who played football in the past, you're familiar with what the Oklahoma drill is, I'm sure. Oklahoma drill is basically you put a big guy right here, you offensive guy, you put a defensive guy right here. There's a running back behind the offensive guy. They hit the offensive running back, tries to find a hole. To me, the new kickoff return rules are basically just Oklahoma drill, where it's only 10 yards of space. And if you got a big athletic tackle who's on your bench, if you put him on this new scheme where he only has to run 5 yards, that's essentially having a tackle on the line of scrimmage and a defensive end playing in a wide 9 stance. That's the level of distance they're going to be on kickoff. And they do that all day. So now you're telling me I can put a big 6'8" Matt Waletzko, 6'8", 7-foot wingspan, 320 pounds, runs a 5.40, by the way. So he has some athleticism. I can put him right here in the middle of my kickoff return and tell him to just block whoever's in front of him. And if a team makes the mistake of putting a linebacker right there in front of him, he's going to destroy him. And that's going to be an open gap right up the middle for your kickoff return. That's what I see when I see these rules. Also, we have a fan favorite, Brevin Spann Ford, the tight end. Before training camp started, I said I think he's gonna make the team because of his blocking on offense. Now that I look at these kickoff return rules, he's definitely making the team because now you've got arguably the best blocking tight end who runs a 4.7, and you put him in the middle of your kickoff return unit, and you tell him to block a linebacker or a safety. He's blowing that guy up. And I think we're going to see that happen as well. And then you got a guy like Jeff Pop said. You got running backs like Hunter Lipke, very good blocking back. You've also got a guy like Freeman, who is a very well-known special teamer and blocking back. You put those guys on your front line as well against a corner or a safety. If a team chooses to do that, now you're building advantages up on your front wall. And don't forget, all these advantages are happening while you have Kevontae Turpin as your returner. So I think there's going to be a lot of different games played at the bottom of the roster that are going to be emphasized solely on kickoff and kickoff return. So yeah, imagine Tyreek Hill on returns. If you have an offensive lineman out there and he can just, and if the guy in front of him is not as big or as physical, he can just mow him down, which is what I think is going to happen. So I'm expecting to see a minimum, definitely one tackle, possibly two tackles on your kickoff return team. I think we're going to go heavy on tight ends because, again, 5-yard distance. Schoonmaker is a very, very good blocking tight end. He cut his teeth in college as a blocking tight end. So you got a guy like Schoonmaker. You got a guy like Brevin Spann Ford. You got Hunter Lipke. You've got athletic tackles. We still haven't talked about Earl Bostic Jr., the athletic tackle from Kansas, who runs a sub 540. You throw him on kickoff return. 5-yard distance. Defensive guy has to try to get around him. And the problem with that is, because it's kickoff return, those kickoff guys can't pick a side. Because if I'm the defender and I'm 6'2", 230, if a linebacker is coming at me and he picks a side, if I get my hands on him right here, I'm turning them. Look where the gap is. That's nothing but clear space behind me. And that small linebacker is not getting around me. So kickoff guys technically can't really pick a side if there are big returners, big guys on the return team. So they have to now try to go straight through them. So if you got 6'8" Matt Walesko against a linebacker and he's trying to go straight through him, good luck. These are going to be some game-changing things for a kickoff and kickoff return. We have a lot of big safeties. I think a lot of those guys are going to make the team because of these rules. I think a guy like a Tyrus Wheat, defensive end, who runs a 4.6, 270, he's going to make the team at the bottom of the roster. Personally, in my opinion, Tim Estabrook, thank you. I'm always excited about special teams. If you learn to follow this show, anybody who knows me knows I love talking special teams. What was I just talking about? Oh, yeah. So when I look on the offensive side of the ball, these kickoff rules are going to make tight ends become more valuable. I think we're going to only keep 5 receivers because your 6th receiver, who was normally a special teams guy, because of these new kickoff rules, you don't necessarily need him unless he's a great blocker. You just keep an extra tight end and put him in that spot because it's only a 5-yard difference. So I would not be shocked to see this team only keep 5 receivers and then end up going either 5 deep at tight end or going 4 to 5 deep at running back, or playing the veteran game with a guy like Freeman, put him on practice squad, and then call him up twice and try to find a spot on the roster as needed during the week. Jeff Pop asked a question about Parsons. And this is going back to the beginning of the show. We talked about Sam Williams. I would say not so much Parsons, because you just don't want to risk him getting hurt. But a guy like Sam Williams, who's basically the same height, weight, speed as Parsons, he would have been amazing under these new kickoff rules. And I hate that we're not going to get a chance to see that. And Mendoza says he agrees. And also, the bottom of our receiving core is not very talented. I mean, some guys are standing out, but there's no household name to say, okay, we want to keep this guy around and see what he has. If I have a chance to have a sixth receiver who may never touch the field, and now I don't need him on special teams, or I can keep Brevin Spann-Ford, who could be integral in opening a gap on kickoff return, I'm gonna keep the fifth tight end. If Freeman turns out to be a great special teamer, which I've heard, but I haven't had a chance to see it, and the team really liked Zeke and they like Dowdle and they want to keep Lepke on the field, and Nate Pete steps up like I think he will, they may think about keeping Freeman. Like I just talked about, you got a guy like Earl Bostic Jr. He was a rookie last year, got hurt. Super athletic tackle, extremely raw. Years past, you try to put him on a practice squad, but now you got an ability to put him on kickoff return, and because he's so big, you put him in the center of your return unit and just tell him to eliminate whatever smaller guy they put in front of him. You're going to find a roster spot for him. So now you may keep a fifth tackle or a fourth tackle when you normally only keep three. So there's going to be some bottom of the roster things that are going to change. In years past, we may have kept 7 corners. Now, under the new rules, if you know you've got 2 core special teamers at other positions, you know Goodwin's going to be one, you find another one somewhere else. Now that 7th corner, you may decide to go 5 safeties instead, because we have 5 big safeties who can all run and who can all hit. So there are going to be some guys that are fan favorites that we really thought are going to make this team that may not have a chance, because these new kickoff and kickoff return rules are going to be so valuable for field position. Because now think about it. We've got the best return in the league based off Pro Bowl standings. If you're able to bring in your 51st player on your roster, and because he's on kickoff, it allows you to get an extra 10 yards of field position. So instead of starting off at the 30, you're now starting at the 40 and 45. Or you have Eric Scott Jr., who was a 4th round pick last year. We haven't seen anything out of him, but we like the potential. You're probably going to keep the safety, because the safety is going to give you instant dividends. And Eric Scott Jr., while he's the 7th corner and we like the potential, he's not giving you anything. So those are things you're going to have to keep in mind when it comes to special teams and how this roster is going to be developed. And Tim Esterbrook says McCarthy was giving Freeman huge praises as a running back, understanding the scheme. So I think Royce will play more than anticipated. I've also heard he was a great special teamer. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind. Jeff Pop says, when do I have my opening day prediction show? So last week I did my pre-training camp show. So I'll probably do my opening day prediction show after or right before the third game. So the last game of preseason will probably be that Thursday or Friday. I'll probably do my show that Wednesday right before. And Jonathan says Sam Williams was playing gunner. Exactly. Imagine a guy who's athletic enough to play gunner now playing under these new kickoff rules where he only has to run 10 yards instead of 40 or 50. He would have been perfect under the scheme, but unfortunately, we don't get to see that now. Jeff says Schoonmaker has a position on the team. Yeah, he's a great blocker. He may not give us much on offense, but the guy can definitely block. And I think he's going to be valuable when it comes to kickoff. Now, this is just me being a special teams head and just thinking just off the wall. Let me go back to the chart. So when I look at kickoff return in particular, this is how I could possibly see it. Your two guys in the middle are probably tackles, offensive tackles. And then you have roughly, what's that, 7 other guys. I could see 3 of those guys being tight ends. I could see 2 being running backs, and then the 2 on the outside are your Mukwamu and your Goodwin, because those positions are basically like gunner jammers. So if you have that lineup, now that you got all these offensive guys, I could see situations where you start doing pulling and trapping, where if you look from the bottom of the screen and you see 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom of the screen, I could see guys 1 and 2 blocking down, and then 3 kind of pulling to kind of trap a guy running open. I have to draw it up. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds. I have to draw that up one day. But I see a lot of stuff that could definitely happen with these new kickoff rules and how they can affect the roster. Jeff Pop saying Royce Freeman 5 teams in 7 years. I'm not expecting him to do a lot on offense, but if the special teams rules are gonna make the changes I think they are, if the guy can give you an extra 10 or 15 yards of field position, he's worth it as a roster player. That's just the way I see it. Mendoza says there's a spot open on my 53 practically. Lance said he didn't want it. I could probably see Royce now. Did I play the second clip from Bones Fossil? I don't think I played the second clip. So let me play the second clip where Bones Fossil talked about having big bodies on the kickoff, and then we'll get out of here.
I think you probably get a pretty common consensus that you're looking at the pass rush type bodies, the outside linebacker, inside linebacker, tight end bodies, the guys that are maybe a little bit bigger and longer, that, you know, even guys that you would put on kickoff now, but you didn't before because they maybe couldn't run from the 35-yard line and get there in time. So the bigger bodies, the closer quarter combat guys, you know, the guys that can punch and separate, because action happens immediately. There's no run up to everything happening. You know, the guys that can wiggle and squirt through, maybe might not be as valuable or successful because there's not going to be a lot of room to navigate, because it's all starting out where you would be when the ball gets caught, and there's just not as much wiggle room. So, you know, a fast guy, you might have to have him dive off the edges, more like a punt play, you know. And I'm kind of speculating because I don't think anybody truly knows, but maybe you put your speed on the outside like the Gunners, and you put your big bodies on the inside and try to jam it all up.
Yeah, so Bones Fossil was pretty much saying everything I said, and everything that I had that before I saw these clips, and those clips from Bones Fossil really just kind of solidified my initial thoughts. So I'm definitely looking forward to this week's game, a Hall of Fame game, as well as the Cowboys game next week, to see how these new kickoff and kickoff return rules get implemented, and see what type of body types we see on both of these units. Because I feel like I said, 35 to 40 guys on the team are pretty much set. Those last 12 to 13 guys in years past, 3, maybe 4 of those guys were your special teams guys. I think because of these new kickoff rules, out of those 13 back end the roster guys, about 6 or 7 now are going to be determined solely off of kickoff. So I think the back of the roster is going to change dramatically from years past in what we saw in terms of what type of position makes those spots, as well as whether a guy's potential in the future is more important than his potential impact now on special teams. So I'm just a special teams guy. I just like talking about this stuff. I'm sure you guys saw I got pretty excited talking about it. So I hope for you guys who don't like to get into the weeds as much as I do, I hope you guys got something out of that. I hope it gave you another aspect to the game to pay attention to. And I hope it makes you kind of think more about what you see and how it will translate into the regular season. So Jeff says, on the flip side, how does our kickoff team look? So kind of like what Bones Fossil said, I think your outside guys are going to be your gunners. So whoever your gunners are on punt team, those are going to be your outside guys. And once you go inside of them, I think you're going to have your Willie Harvey Jr.'s, your Damian Wilson, big linebackers. You're probably going to have Overshown if he's not a major contributor on defense. So you're going to have Overshown and or Leofow because he's a big linebacker also. So that's 4. That's 6 of your 11. I think the last 5 will probably be 3 of them will probably be defensive ends, and then the last 2 will probably be big safeties like a Marquise Bell, who's a linebacker safety hybrid, and a Wanye Thomas, who's another linebacker safety hybrid. One more guy, I'm going to throw the name out there so you guys can pay attention to him. Imani Johnson, undrafted rookie free agent from Nevada, strong safety, big, physical, 6'2", 217, great tackler. If there's anybody who's undrafted who can make this team and get a guy that we like off, it's Imani Johnson because of the kickoff rule. So he's going to already know if he wants to make this team, he has to make an impact on kickoff. So I'm expecting to see him do a lot when it comes to the games on special teams. Any other ones? Tim Estabrook says he ran well for Denver and the Rams when they put him in. He did have a short span with the Rams where he got like 350 yards in 4 games. So he does still have a little bit of burst, but I just think if he's great on special teams, they're going to find a way to keep him because I think these rules are going to really make some big changes, especially for this year. The rules are temporary, but if they lead to bigger returns and less concussions like the league expects, I think they're going to stick around. So early roster development to get ahead of the curve is going to be very important for all 32 teams. All right, guys, that's all I got for this week. I see the views stayed pretty consistent. The likes got up there pretty high. So thank you guys for all your support. Great comments, great questions as always. Definitely appreciate everybody who stuck with me throughout the entire show. Thank you guys for joining. Hope you guys continue to come back for a lot of you first-time viewers. Hope you guys got something out of it. Next week, we're going to continue our training camp shows. Like I said, this week, I'm not there. And Shaheen Rice, you got one last question. Throw it in while I continue my closing. And I'll get to your question and Jeff's question. So this week, I was not able to go to Oxnard to watch training camp. So all I could really go off of is what I saw online. So Amanda went through the podcast world and she found one of my favorite podcasters, who was actually at Oxnard. So next week, Big Game James, if you're familiar with the podcast, I'm sure most of you guys are, Big Game James will be joining me next week. He has been live at Oxnard. So I'm going to have a ton of questions. If you guys have questions, put them in the comments tonight. Put them in the comments next week. Come back and join us. Big Game James, one of the best football minds that's podcasting, one of the most knowledgeable Cowboy fans that's podcasting. He's going to be joining the show next week. We're going to talk about training camp, and we're going to talk about what he expects to see in week 1 of preseason for the Cowboys. So we're going to talk training camp. We're going to talk preseason. I'm probably going to bring this special team stuff up to see if he's seen any changes in the kickoff and kickoff return units. So it's going to be a great show. Hope you guys come back and join us. And as I said before, if you like to watch the Fifth Quarter podcast, you can join us every Wednesday night, 8:30 Central Standard Time, on Facebook through the DC4L Facebook group, or on YouTube through the DC4L YouTube channel, or through my personal channel, Bluff City Cowboys. So let me hit those last 2 questions, and then we'll get out of here. Shaheen Rice looks like a first timer, so thank you for joining. Do I think Zeke can be a factor for this year? I feel like he may have a 900+ rushing yard year. Shaheen, the answer to that is yes to the first one and no to the second one. I don't see Zeke being more than at best, 800-yard rusher. At best, I think he can average 4 yards a carry. I don't see him getting more than 200 to 210 carries for the year. So simple math, 200 times 4, that's 800 yards. That's kind of where I see Zeke's absolute maximum in terms of rushing yards. Now, that's going to be less than Tony Pollard, but I think Zeke is going to be much better in short yardage and red zone. So if we look at last year, the first 5 games, I can see in my head at least 4 scenarios in the first 5 games where the running back should have gotten a touchdown running it, but he was stopped and we had to settle for a field goal. If we're in scenarios like that this year, I see Zeke converting all of those. I think Pollard only had 6 rushing touchdowns last year. I think Zeke doubles that. I think Zeke gets 10 to 12 rushing touchdowns. So the yards may not be as good, but I think they're going to be more effective on short yardage, and I think he's going to get more rushing touchdowns. So I think he is going to be a factor. I just don't think it's going to be purely on total rushing yardage. And I know that most fans like to judge players off metrics, and they're only going to look at that bottom line number at the end of the year and not pay attention to how many 3rd and 4th downs he converts and how many touchdowns that he creates. Jeff asked the question, with these rules, how about they expand the roster, the game day roster? So there's talk that the league may add an 18th game. So if they add an 18th game, they will definitely do a roster expansion. Until then, I don't think they're going to do one. They're definitely not going to do it for the kickoff rules. But if they expand to 18 games, they will definitely have to do something to add extra bodies to their roster. So unfortunately, Jeff, I don't think these new kickoff rules are going to make any effect on the total players. I just think it's going to affect the type of players at the end of the roster. And like Mendoza said, that habit of falling forward was definitely missed. And Jeff Pop says last 5 games at New England, he averaged 37 yards a game. That's a good point, Jeff Pop. But again, that's looking at everything in a vacuum. You got to take into account certain scenarios. Number one, the Patriots were awful last year. They were never ahead in any games. So they pretty much abandoned the run early. And when they did run it, it was extremely obvious situations. Number two, the Patriots ran an outside zone scheme similar to what we ran. So they rely on their running backs going off tackle and working their way back in. Zeke's no longer that running back anymore. We're going to an inside zone scheme this year. I think that's going to help accentuate Zeke's talents. Now, even with that, I don't think he's 3.2, Jeff Pop. 3.5, I could go with you on that. I think 4.0 is his cap. So don't take me as saying Zeke's going to average 4 yards a carry. I think that's his cap. I think realistically it's more like 3.5, which will put him about 700 to 720 yards rushing. Number three, the Cowboys' offensive line is much, much better than the Patriots. I mean, just interior alone, you got all pro at guard. That alone is going to be much better than anything the Patriots put on the field. So I think because of those three factors, he's definitely going to get more than 3.2 yards per carry. And I think he's going to be more successful. Not a lot more, but more respectable in terms of a rusher. And he's probably going to be the number one guy, so he's going to be able to get a little bit more into that running back rhythm that those big backs have to get into. Zaniga Sapien looks like a new name, so thank you for joining us. The show's about to end, but make sure that you come back and find us at 8:30 Central Standard Time next week for our episode of the Cowboys of the Fifth Quarter podcast. I did it 2 weeks in a row. We're going to have special guest Big Game James. Amanda will probably be joining the show also, so that means there will be a giveaway also. So if you guys want a chance to win some great Dallas Cowboys merchandise, join us next week. We're going to be doing a giveaway. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have for tonight. Again, thank you guys for watching. A lot of first-time viewers, so I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope you guys continue to follow us and continue to leave these great questions and comments that you've been leaving all night. I will see you guys next week at 8:30 Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube for next week's episode of the Fifth Quarter podcast. Be sure to continue to follow social media, keep up with what's going on with the Cowboys so that we can come back and have some great topics for next week. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, let's go Cowboys. I will see you guys next week.